Howdy, everybody. Thank you, Deborah. Welcome, everyone. As Deborah said, my name is Jonathan Walters. I appreciate everybody coming out today and participating in the event. I want to take a minute and actually thank Deborah. This is actually Deborah's 10th year working with the Wine Grape Commission, so thank you very much. All right, I'll get started now. So let me kind of give you what's going to be happening today. So Christian Klier is here from Turrentine. He's going to give us kind of a sense of the current state of the industry and recent grape bulk trends and grape sales. Then a research team from the USGS will give you a sneak peek of what they've been researching and analyzing in the volcanic characteristics of our region. After that, we'll take a quick little break. We'll showcase the Lake County Pruning School, featuring a presentation by world-renowned vine master pruners from Simonette and Cirque. A panel discussion of growers who attended the event will take place after that, and a demonstration from our partners in Felco with the wonderful products that they are offering. As Deborah said, everybody presenting today will be has been asked to answer questions from you guys. So feel free to ask a question once the presentation is over. With that, I'll go ahead and start with our first presenter, Christian Klier. Christian comes from a multi-generation pear farming background here in Lake County. He began his farming career at the age of 4 of driving a tractor, don't tell OSHA, Christian, with his father and his grandfather setting smudge pots during frost season. While in high school, I did ask this, in high school, he managed multiple small pear packing sheds during the summer with his friends, and he also earned a degree in viticulture and tree fruits from Fresno State. Christian worked with the Welch Vineyard Management Company in Mendocino County, where he eventually became director of vineyard operations in Lake County, overseeing 1,500 acres. From there, Christian went on to work with Shannon Ranches as the winery relation and viticulturalist, and eventually the vice president overseeing farming operations of about 4,500 acres in 6 counties. Today, Christian works with Turrentine Broker as their North Coast grape broker. He is here today to share data and latest insights with the current state of the wine grape industry. Please join me in welcoming Christian Klier.
What a pleasure to be here with you all today. Sorry about the long intro there. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd today. Appreciate you having me today. We're going to talk about the grape industry, and let's get started. So a lot of these graphs are numbers that we track within Turrentine. And first off, I like to say, a Lake County born and raised person, 4th generation, glad to be here, glad to be representing Lake County in the brokerage world. I'm not sure if anyone in the brokerage world has ever came out of Lake County, and if they have, I don't know who they are. So want to say that I'm here to represent the North Coast, Lake and Mendocino County, more so than any other brokers have in the past. So glad to be here, glad to be talking to you all. As most of you know, Sauvignon Blanc has been a very hot varietal and a very popular varietal here in Lake County. So the good news there is the market is strong. We still have a lot of active buyers, and the price is the best we've seen in the history of Lake County for Sauvignon Blanc. Consumers seem to be gravitating towards that varietal, and we're seeing it not only in consumption, but also in grape purchasing, the reflection of that, which is all positive. I wish I could say the same about red grapes in the North Coast. Last year seemed to be pretty strong. We had a lot of activity in the year before coming through the pandemic, but this year it's been a lot quieter. So, and we think that has a lot to do with the reflection of the interior valley. So in my experience here in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of interior valleys come over to Lake and Mendocino County to buy fruit, especially Cabernet, to make their valley programs better. Since the report has came out this year that we've seen a downturn in the lower bottom tier price point, $5.99 and below, a 6% drop in that category, which is the largest drop in that category since its inception. So those wineries that would come over here and pick up large tonnage, 1,000 tons, 500 tons at a time, have not been active in the market. And that what we used that activity as leverage to the smaller North Coast wineries that would come up and buy their out of Appalachian fruit from us too. So we don't currently have that dynamic happening in the industry right now, and so the the other small wineries who are looking for a truckload or 2 truckloads or 3 truckloads have not had that competition in the market to drive that price. So we are seeing a depressed market in regards to Cabernet. Specifically, Zinfandel seems to be following that channel as well. Okay, here we go. So back to the beginning. Most of you have probably seen the Turrentine wheel. Some people call it the Wheel of Fortune. Some people call it the Wheel of Torture. It can be both. So we'll talk about what slows down the wheel. And so we see flat case sales. That slows the wheel down. Some wineries long on case goods in bulk and grapes. That will slow the wheel down. And grapes being planted in the North Coast or overplanted in all regions can slow that wheel down. And this is what speeds the wheel up. So removal of acres, shorter contract lengths, resurgent in retail sales, just-in-time inventory, and buyers coming back to the market. So that's kind of what we saw during the pandemic 2 years ago. And that made us feel the wheel was speeding back up again. Coming off of the 2018, 2019 heavy 2 years of crops, we did see a serious slowdown in contracting, especially moving into 20. But then pantry stocking during the pandemic definitely increased case goods. We saw sales increase and wineries coming back to the market to purchase more fruit at decent pricing. And that held through 21 and 22. Now that we're in 23, we're seeing a little bit of a pushback here. We first thought that maybe we'd moved through the excess section of the wheel when we saw the upturn during the pandemic. And the wheel is round and it goes through transitions between excess and not enough, so peak of shortage. So originally we thought maybe we'd push directly through the peak of excess during the pandemic and moved back to the transition to a peak of shortage. But now that we've studied the market a little bit better, we actually think we kind of went backwards during the pandemic, and now we're back into the transition between peak of shortage and peak of excess, leaning towards a peak of excess at this point, just based on case good sales and winery sales and consumption in the market. So here we have the California statewide tons crushed. And as you can tell, in 2022, we're down in tons, but we are also down in 21 and 20. A lot of the 20 tons, though, we don't really count because a lot of that fruit, due to smoke damage, was not taken in by the wineries. So, but 3 years of a downturn since 2018 in tons, total tons crushed. So that equals lighter crops for 3 years in a row. And a lot of the wineries rejected some fruit, and then they didn't have any inventory. So at that point, we were backing up on bulk gallons, probably to the peak of our bulk gallons listed ever. And 21 came around, and we saw a huge decrease in gallons available. We saw those gallons sell, and then we saw wineries coming back to the market. So 22 really mirrored 2011 in regards to the tons crushed. And there was a lot of grapes pulled out also in the Interior Valley, with nut crops, almonds, and pistachios doing really well in the market, walnuts as well. Growers were taking old vineyards out and replacing them with almonds. And we've seen a slowdown in that. As most of you probably know, that market has also slowed down itself. And so now we're kind of, we felt last year we were in a more balanced position. Now it's feeling a little bit underbalanced. Next slide, please. So here we have tons crushed by region, and I like this slide just because the North Coast actually is the only winner here. So all other regions, Central Coast, Northern Interior, Southern Interior, were all down again in 2022 in tons produced compared to the 5-year average. We were actually up in the North Coast, Lake and Mendocino and Napa specifically. We saw actually Lake County broke its production record for Cabernet Sauvignon in 2022, and so did Mendocino County. And we think that's a byproduct not of a large crop, because we know, most of you know, the crop was pretty light last year, especially on the hillsides. But we did see new vineyards coming online. And even though it was first-year crop on most of those vineyards, it did add to the total, and it did increase the total tons produced in both those counties, Lake County and Mendocino County. And apologies, I should have said this earlier. When we refer to the North Coast at Turrentine, we're talking about Lake and Mendocino County combined. We combine those two regions. They're small regions, and the numbers aren't enough numbers for us to calculate graphs and have these spreads. So we combine those two in acres planted so we can get good reading and good numbers that we can share with you. So next slide, please. And then here we have bulk by region, and this is an important slide I want everyone to pay attention to. We're almost at 22 million gallons of bulk wine listed available with us. That's to the far right-hand side in the 2023. If you look back, we haven't been at this point since about 2020 or 2019, and that was when we were at the peak of excess. And then we saw a huge drop in 21 and 22 on bulk gallons, and that was wineries coming back to the party, one might say, and purchasing more wine because sales were increasing. And now the anomaly about this slide is we have never seen this amount of gallons backed up into the market following a short or light crop. So that is the anomaly that we're watching very closely. It's surprising to us. So most of this fruit was contracted and taken by wineries and then relisted back onto the market with us to sell because they overestimated the tons and gallons they needed to produce based on case good sales. So that is the most interesting. All the other peaks in 2019, 2015, 2016, and all the way back to 2010, all of those peaks did not follow a short or light crop. Those were average crops or better, and we expect to see bulk gallons come back onto the market after a large crop, but not after a short crop. So that is worrisome in the market. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk about Cab Sauv, the most important grape, I would say, in the North Coast, most widely planted. Next slide. Here we have tons crushed, Cabernet recent crop history, and looking at the North Coast, you can see on the right-hand side is gray, that's 2022, all the way over to the left-hand side, 2018. And 2022 had the highest production in the North Coast for Cabernet in the last 5 years and ever. Other regions such as Central Coast were way down. Lodi was down. Southern Interior was down. Sonoma was about the same as 2021. And then Napa was a little bit up from 2021. That all contributed to the position we're in currently with Cabernet Sauvignon in the North Coast, which is it's feeling a little bit long. We don't have a lot of activity out there. We're missing some of the buyers that we'd seen in the last 10 years, and part of that was some of the big valley buyers that were coming over here to make their California blends better with some of our North Coast fruit to compete on the bottom shelf market, and those folks just have not been to the market so far. But we are running, quite a bit later this year in the growing season than we'd seen in the last 3 years, and we're hopeful that those markets will pick back up and those wineries will be back into the market to purchase some Cab Sauv this year. Next slide. And then here we have our district average pricing and our spot market Turrentine pricing, and then our spot high and our spot low in Turrentine. So the yellow line is the district average for Lake and Mendocino pricing for Cabernet, and that's running about $2,000 a ton. Our spot market pricing for Turrentine is the red line with the triangles, and we're pretty close to matching that district average. And then we have our spot high, which is the top tight dotted line, and our spot low. So we did see some sales, reach $2,500 a ton, but we also saw some grapes last year sell at below $1,500 a ton in Cabernet. So it's a pretty wide spread there. And when I see a wide spread on all four of those lines, it tells me that it's an out of balanced market. Typically, if we see all those lines kind of merging together at the end there in 2022, it tends to be a fairly balanced market. So when you watch these graphs, pay attention to that, to the spread on the lines at the end in 2022. That should give you an idea of where we feel the market is, whether it's balanced or not balanced. Next slide, please. And then here we have the Cabernet Sauvignon bulk gallons activity for sale. So the gray, obviously, is California appellation. The green is Central Coast. The yellow is us in North Coast. Red is Sonoma, and Napa Valley is blue. So clearly we have very few gallons of available Napa Cabernet. And so the Napa Cabernet market has stayed very active, very, very tight market, not very much fruit available down there. But we up here, being the yellow, are pushing close to 2 million gallons listed on the market of Cabernet in the North Coast. And that, once again, that's a combination of Lake and Mendocino County. Obviously, Central Coast has quite a few more gallons too. They're pushing above 2 million. And then we have the Central Valley going all the way up to 6 million there. So the Central Valley is really backed up on Cabernet. Here we have our Lake County Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc bulk gallons available and weighted average price. So Obviously, we are in 2023 at the far right-hand corner. If you look at 2022, we saw some gallons back up, but those depleted during the winter, back down to, maybe a million or 2 million gallons. But now here we are, to a million gallons, but here we are back up to 2+ million gallons of Lake County Cabernet backed up onto the market, which is not a good sign for the grape market, because what we typically have seen at Turrentine is the grape market follows the bulk wine market. So as gallons of bulk wine back up in our system and are put on the market for sale, typically within a year or more, we will see grapes start to back up the same way. And the blue line is kind of like us following the pricing for what we've seen and where pricing has been landing for those gallons. And the blue line all the way to the far right is right around the $15 per gallon mark. And where there's breaks and misses, there's just not been that much activity. We have not moved that wine, so we don't track that. We don't have tracking on that number. But the gallons are backing up and the price seems to be going down. Next slide, please. Here we have our Cabernet weighted average price per gallon. Once again, the yellow line is us up here in Lake and Mendocino County, and that's correlating pretty close to $15 or $12 to $15 per gallon. Central Coast is selling it a little bit cheaper, $8 to $9 per gallon, and then the Central Valley's in the gray or brown. That's below $5, and Napa is the blue, the top, and that's going between $40 and $45 a gallon currently is what we're seeing in the market. Next slide, please. Sauvignon Blanc. So we got past the bad story, we're on to the good story. Sauvignon Blanc, strong in the market, a lot of activity. As I mentioned earlier, we have multiple buyers in the market actively looking for Sauvignon Blanc from Lake County. I believe the Wine Commission has done a great job in marketing Sauvignon Blanc for this county and built its reputation around this varietal. I know some of you growers out there who do a great job with it and have also contributed to that marketing. And Lake County is known throughout the state. So we have multiple buyers from South Central Valley that come up looking for Sauvignon Blanc in Lake County, and Napa wineries who can't seem to find it in Napa County anymore look to Lake County next for their needs. And so it's a great story, Sauvignon Blanc. Next slide, please. Here we have Sauvignon Blanc recent crop history. And we did do better in Sauvignon Blanc in the North Coast, almost matched or tied the high in 2019 of tons produced. And that's a combination, again, of Lake and Mendocino County. Other regions didn't do as well. Napa did a little bit better than in 21. Central Coast was down quite a bit, so that brought a lot of buyers from the Central Coast up to the North Coast, and the Delta, Lodi area, and Southern Interior were once again down. In general, I'll say that 2021 across the state was the largest production of Sauvignon Blanc in the entire state history. So there was a lot of new tons that came on in 21 in the Central Coast and Central Valley. A lot of Central Valley growers, wine grape growers, switched from Chardonnay to Sauvignon Blanc, predicting there'd be a shift that direction, and those tons definitely showed up in force in 2021. Now, those crops were down again in 2022, and anyone who's grown enough Sauvignon Blanc knows that it can be that way. It can be a big crop one year and then not very much crop the next year. So we're expecting that crop to come back up again in the Interior Valley and in the Central Coast, and that's going to put pressure on our market. But as for now and today, we're seeing a lot of activity, good pricing, best pricing we've seen in the history of this county on Sauvignon Blanc, and that's even coming off of a better crop than we saw in 2021 for the North Coast. Again, it was a good crop. Next slide, thank you. Here we have our district average price per ton spot market, and again, we see these lines down all the way down into 2022 to the right-hand side, all merging, and they're merging up. So that is a good sign for the market. That's a good sign of interest in this varietal, in this market, in this area. We saw, once again, some of our highest pricing above $2,000 a ton for Sauvignon Blanc in 2022, which is a great price. I've been growing Sauvignon Blanc for a very long time here in Lake County, and I'd never saw that kind of pricing for Sauvignon Blanc in the 10 years that I was growing it. So very happy to see that for that varietal in this region. I'm glad our reputation is getting well known for Sauvignon Blanc in the whole state of California. Next slide. And here we have Turrentine's Turrentine spot market grape pricing. This is a percent change in price that we saw in 21 compared to 22. And we saw on the North Coast for Sauvignon Blanc a 35% increase in pricing from 21 to 22. That's a huge jump. Sonoma County only jumped 33%. I think the North Coast had the biggest jump percentage in pricing from the 21 harvest to the 22 harvest. Next slide, please. And then here we have the bulk gallons availability. As you can see, we're well below 1 million gallons on Sauvignon Blanc. We do have some availability. Once again, that's the yellow is Lake County and Mendocino County, and but not very much. And anyone who's worked with Sauvignon Blanc is if you don't get it sold in February or March, the market kind of drops away. So these are gallons that were probably held on the market a little bit too long or listed late that the buyers kind of moved past. Sauvignon Blanc's a hard varietal to blend into white blends or mixed with Chardonnay, so but not very many gallons left available. We do have a small amount of Sonoma County and a tiny bit of Napa County, and I would say most of that wine was just missed the market and presented late or off timing, or some of it could even be left over a little bit from the year before. Next slide, please. And then here we have, once again, apologies for the broken white or blue lines up there, but that's where we track marketing and large sales. We have seen the pricing going up on this per gallon, but really from 21 to 22, you see a big blank right there. That's because we just didn't have any available. We didn't have any sales. All that fruit was taken or all that juice was kept by the winery. So there was very little fruit available. Now we're starting to see a little bit put back on the market all the way into 2023, and that would have been 2022 crushed fruit, and not very much though, well below 100,000 gallons, and that is still trading at somewhere, and the blue line, I think it's right around $12 to $14 a gallon. So trading very closely to the Cabernet price per gallon, which is not a good sign for Cabernet, but a great sign for Sauvignon Blanc. Next slide, please. And we'll talk about Chardonnay. I know we don't grow very much Chardonnay in Lake County, but it is an important varietal in the industry, and I think we can draw some information from this varietal just in general about the market. Please, next slide. So once again, we're in the North Coast there. Most of that fruit is Mendocino County on the chart. They did better in 21 than they did better in 22 than they did in 21. We saw a little increase in production, a little increase in tons, but overall, in general, the state was down in Chardonnay significantly. And then we've seen a huge increase in interest in all North Coast Chardonnay. So North Coast Chardonnay, even Lake County, has interested buyers. We've pretty much worked through all the availability in Sonoma County, and now those wineries have started looking into Lake and Mendocino County for their Chardonnay needs to make up the differences they were unable to obtain in Sonoma County mostly, and Napa County. So we are seeing activity there. Chardonnay seems to be a strong varietal. We have multiple wineries. Sparkling houses have been doing very well in the market, and many sparkling houses have been out contracting Chardonnay in the North Coast for their sparkling programs. A little less price, but you get to pick it early, so we're glad to see those companies doing well, and we're glad to see the activity on white grapes. White grapes in general in the market have been more popular than red grapes this year to start off the year. We're hoping that kind of switches a little bit because we're moving through the white grapes. There's not very many left, tons available, but we still have quite a few tons of red grapes left available. Next slide, please. So here's our spot market versus district average and spot high and low again. These ones are merging in completely different directions, which worries me in regards to the balance of the market. Obviously, our spot average is a little bit higher than the district average for what we saw grapes selling for in 2022, but not too far off. $1,400 a ton seems to be the going rate, especially in Mendocino County, $1,450 maybe. Sparkling, it's around $1,350 a ton. But we do see quite a divergence in the spot high and the low. Some of the spot high reaching upwards to $1,700 a ton, and the spot low as low as $600 a ton. So I think that low is probably a little bit of excess that was sold late in the end of the season that didn't have a contract, probably overage tons, and that's icing on the cake. Next slide, please. So here we have the percent change in regards to pricing on Chardonnay compared to Napa County, Sonoma County, and North Coast, which is Lake and Mendocino. North Coast jumped 11%, Napa Valley and Sonoma County around 18 and 19% price difference. So everything has been going up in price on white grapes. Can't say the same for red grapes in the North Coast. Next slide, please. And here we have our gallons available. Again, not too many. The largest amount are from the Interior Valley. Not too many yellow gallons available. That's North Coast. 0 Napa and a little bit of Sonoma gallons available on the market currently. So white grapes, again, trending popular. Not too hard to sell. Red grapes, a little bit more difficult. Next slide, please. And this is a really spotty sales market. The blue lines, once again, are marked price points for gallons, and we don't have very many gallons available. In the North Coast, 50,000 maybe. That's a low number compared to what we've seen in the past, and pricing is right around $10 to $12 per gallon is what we've seen Lake and Mendocino County bulk wine trading for. Next slide, please. Talk about red blenders now. I know we grow a lot of Petit Syrah, Zinfandel, Malbec here in Lake County. All those varietals, Petit Verdot, are included in this red blenders slide, so keep that in mind as we're moving through these slides. Next, please. So red blenders, recent crop history, we did all right. Actually, we beat the 2021 crop on red blenders in 2022. That was a little bit heavier of a crop, matched the 2018 crop again. In the North Coast, Sonoma was flat. Napa was a little bit above what they had produced in 21, but nowhere near their 2018 and 2019 crops. Central Coast was way down, back to the 2020 crop load, and Lodi and Southern Interior both down compared to 2021. So we saw strong demand in red blenders last year and the year before. Lake and Mendocino County Petit Syrah leading that charge, I would say. Good activity. We're still seeing fair activity in those markets and those varietals here in Lake and Mendocino County, but I am sensing a slowdown in the market on those as well. They're starting to pair up with Cab Sauv. I think early buyers were out and got what they needed, and now everyone's waiting to see what the crop's going to look like, to see if they're going to come in and pick up some more tons, or if they're going to wait and if it's going to be a heavy crop, buy them cheaper later in the season. Next slide, please. And I'm really not sure what that anomaly is. I call it the hat. So someone came in and picked up quite a few tons from 2016 to 2020 at a very expensive pricing, upwards of $8,000 a ton. I'm not sure where that happened or who that was, but ignore that. We're looking at about $2,000 a ton for red blenders in the North Coast. All those lines coming together pretty evenly. A little bit spot low, is 1,500. Spot high is 2,800 a ton on red blenders. So that's the tracking that we've done at Turrentine. Spot market is right on top of the district average there at the end in 2022. So we're calling it about $2,000 a ton is what we feel is fair market price on red blenders. And once again, we've seen fair activity early this season on red blenders, but that market has slowed. And this tends to be time of the season for that. Everybody wants to see how crop set comes, and cluster counts looked average plus so far, some better, but everyone's waiting to see how that crop sets and what kind of crop that's going to be. The wineries will wait until they have a better indication of what that crop's going to be before they come back and finalize their allocations. I will say in the last 2 years, the wineries that waited and hoped that the crop was going to be bigger all ended up paying more money at the end of the season for the same amount of fruit, and they had to pay higher pricing. All the wineries are hoping that it doesn't occur again this year with all the rains that we received. Most of them are hoping for a heavier crop where they can come in a little bit lighter than what they paid the last few years for these varietals, and all varietals. Next slide, please. Red blenders, the spot market change. This was a big one for the North Coast. Spot market change between 2021 and 2022 is 21%. Some of the largest gains out of any of the varietals. Good gains for growers up here. We're glad to see that market come back around. I remember 5 years ago when we were selling Petit Syrah for $1,400 or $1,300 a ton, and then here we are at $2,000 again. So strong market. As I said earlier, we still have buyers out there looking at these grapes, and it's not in the same category as Cabernet Sauvignon. Next slide, please. And here's the gallons. As you can see, we don't have too many gallons available, and that's a good sign for the market for red blenders, except for in the interior. So the interior, once again, are struggling. As I mentioned earlier, that bottle price saw the largest drop in percentage sales in the history of that bottle price, which is $5.99 and below, dropped 6%, and that has definitely put a slowdown on the interior valley, which in turn, in a way, a roundabout way, brings a slower market here to the North Coast, because a lot of those buyers do come over here to the North Coast and pick up some better fruit to be competitive on the market against their competitors. So we're not seeing those buyers in the market so far this year, although we're hoping that they are still coming. Sales, new numbers come in every month, and as those sales increase, and we expect them to increase, those wineries hopefully will be back in the market. Next slide, please. Here we go, the gallons of red blenders and pricing that we've seen, upwards to $16 to $17 a gallon for some red blenders in 2023. Not very many gallons, 300,000 total. Most of those gallons are interior valley grapes, not our North Coast grapes, but still strong market, strong demand for those varietals. Next slide, please. And to finish off, these are just a few things I want to leave everybody with today. 3 years in a row, ununiform yields, which causes uncertainty in the market, uncertainty by wine grape buyers, and everyone is kind of trying to figure it out. And it's been hard to figure out with the lack of uniformity in crop. We've seen 3 short crops in a row. That spurred a lot of buying. We're catching up to that now. Gallons are getting put back on the market, and we're starting to see a slowdown, especially in Cabernet, for purchasing tons. The market is more balanced. It's felt more balanced the last 3 years, not based on consumption, but based on demand for those grapes. The lack of availability with short crops caused competition amongst the buyers that were out there. That proved price to get stronger for the grower, and that has kept everybody in business. The challenges are to cost of operation and inflation for all. That's the biggest challenge for wineries and growers. We'll all have to work together to get through this. We've been through times like this before. I'm sure we'll get through these times again. And that's what I got for you today. So appreciate your time. I think we'll take some questions here now. If anyone has a question, I'm here to try to give you an answer. Yes, sir.
Yeah, great talk. Thank you so much. I'm Andre Gesiek at the Mount Saint-Helena Vineyard. Quick question. I'm assuming Cabernet Franc, you qualified as a red blender, correct?
Correct, we do. That Cab Franc was blended into the red blends, yes.
And so what would be the explanation why the red blenders are doing well, while the Cabernet Sauvignon is singled out as not doing well at all? I mean, they seem to go together, supposed to blend together, don't they?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think wineries, first off, we don't have as many acres planted to those red blenders as we do to Cabernet, so that's a big, big difference. And the wineries who have been purchasing the red blenders don't come up, we're not trying to sell them thousands of tons of Cabernet. They come up and buy 2 truckloads of Cab Franc, and that's it, right? And so because there's so limited plantings of it and so few acres, it seems to move a little bit faster, and a little bit of Cab Franc goes a long way.
Tia Russell with Doherty Nursery. You said that people weren't coming over to buy the reds. Do you think maybe they're going into other areas to buy the reds?
That is a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, yes. So I feel like, and I've felt this way for the past 10 years, that our number one competition in Lake County for Cabernet has been the Central Coast and Paso Robles. And they've done a great job of marketing their Cabernet. I don't know if any of you have tried it. It's highly doctored Cabernet, but they've done a really good job of marketing themselves down there. And being so close to LA, they've done some sponsorships at large events and gotten some really good recognition for their value and their quality. So another factor that factors into that is that when we started having the smoke events up here in Lake County 2014, Bruce and I remember those very well, working together at Shannon Ranches. Wineries started second guessing their purchases up here in Lake and Mendocino County, and they started looking elsewhere that they felt were maybe a safer play in regards to red grapes. And we saw a drive down to the Central Coast, and they ended up finding some quality down there, especially around the Paso Robles area, that worked for their programs, and they felt the risk to any kind of smoke damage was less down there, and they've stuck down there. Now, it's going to be our job in this industry is to bring them back up here, and I don't entirely know how we do that. I do think that our quality is higher quality here in the North Coast, especially in Lake and Mendocino County for Cabernet. But the other difficulty is the farms in Central Coast are typically very large and institutional. And when you have large farming, as anybody who out here, and most of you know, and you can spread your tractor costs and your pruning costs and your labor costs and everything else across a large number of acres, you can offer that grape at a cheaper price per ton because your farming costs are cheaper because you spread those costs. And that's what Central Coast does really well to beat us to the market, is they will adapt to the market quicker, in my experience, and drop that price per ton to drag those wineries over to them before and I mean, the growing season happens faster down there too, so they know what their crop load looks like before we know what it looks like up here. But by being able to offer that fruit at a cheaper price earlier than we can in the North Coast, they've taken away a lot of the winery business from us in the North Coast here. They're able to adapt, they're able to spread that cost across thousands of acre plantings, where most of us are small, independent growers. 40, 50, 100 acres is a big ranch in Lake and Mendocino County for vineyards. So that has also been a difficulty that we're gonna have to, up here on the North Coast, somehow overcome. I think our association and our proximity to Napa has been doing a good job of counterbalancing that, but we still are losing ground to the Central Coast for sure. Any more questions? Well, thank you all for having me here today. It's a pleasure to speak to all of you. My heart's with Lake County, always will be. Thank you so much.